You're listening to the What's Happening podcast with Gary Watts.
Good morning. I'm here this morning with Mike Young, who's the founder of Valor Wealth Planning. So Mike and I have known each other a long time, and I'm really excited to have Mike on board this morning. We're going to have a lot of fun. So, Mike, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm actually very well.
Great. Beautiful day, huh?
Yeah, it's an incredible day. I'm really excited to be able to share this time with you.
Good. So am I. So let's start with tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, a little bit maybe about high school, college, wherever you want to go with that. So for people that are watching or listening, who in the heck is Mike Young, and tell us about Mike Young?
Well, I've been many places and done many things, but I grew up here in eastern Iowa. My father was chief of police in Tipton, Iowa, and so I had a pretty typical Iowa upbringing, and that's very much informed the rest of my life. You know, my dad was a combat veteran in Vietnam.
So if he's police chief, you never got in trouble?
Sadly, I got in trouble more than the other children. I got ticketed in 7th grade for riding two on a moped. So,
all right, good.
Yeah, my dad didn't take it easy on me, but he was great. He's a definitely heroic figure in my life. You know,
how did Vietnam affect him?
Profoundly.
Yeah.
He enlisted with his best friend Mike O'Connor. He was from Mount Pleasant, Iowa, and he thought it was the right thing to do. You know, that was a controversial war for sure, and it was a war that when young men came back to the United States, they were not treated well. And while even now he understands the sentiment of Americans who were confused about the war, but it doesn't affect the fact that they were treated terribly. And I would suggest that he has scars that have remained for the rest of his life, and they manifested in a lot of behaviors and a lot of emotional scarring. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my quick Vietnam take is I had a card. I had a draft card. We had numbers. Graduated high school in '73, and that was just at the end when they quit the draft.
Yeah.
But I remember going to the courthouse. I had my draft card. I think my lottery number was 273. At that time, it was a lottery. They didn't just draft people.
Yeah.
Did they draft your father, or did he enlist?
My father enlisted, actually. His dad was in Navy in World War II, and my dad's older brother played football at Wisconsin. He was a football star.
Really?
My father was 5'7" and 135 pounds when he graduated from high school, and 2 years later he was 6'1" and 195 pounds when he was in Vietnam.
Wow.
And pretty impressive. And so during the Tet Offensive, if you have any sense of the Vietnam War.
69, right?
68, yeah.
Tet Offensive, okay.
Yeah. And the Tet is a holiday in Vietnam, and so they'd called a ceasefire for the holiday, and then they sneak attacked Saigon. And my father was a military policeman in Saigon, and he ended up protecting the United States Embassy. And there's a documentary about he and his group of military police, the 716th, and he won a Bronze Star for valor, and so
wow,
yeah.
Well, thank you for your service. It's that was obviously a tough war, and I've been to D.C. I've seen the Vietnam Memorial. That's really heavy. It's just a black granite. It goes down, and all those 59,000 folks on it, which is really tough.
I have an image of my dad and I there several years ago, and you're right. It's the kind of thing you can. It's palpable. You can feel the weight of it, and so for me, the same. I think part of it is growing up in the Midwest with those sensibilities, but also, which I think keep us in check a lot. Right. I've had the pleasure in my life. I lived in Winter Park, Florida. I went to a very exclusive private liberal arts college called Rollins College. I got a degree in philosophy and economics. I played college golf, Porsche 911 convertibles driving around with 19-year-old kids driving them. And I've lived in Boston and in New York and Connecticut and Dallas. And as a professional, both in the hotel industry, because I worked my way through college in the hotel industry, and I was a hotel executive in Dallas. And I've been in investments, wealth management for 25 years now. But I've had the good fortune of living in so many of these different places and seeing how other people live and what their microcultures are in these cosmopolitan areas. And then I returned to Iowa City about when I met you in 2003.
Was that 3?
Yeah, 2003.
Seems like the other day.
Yeah, time flies, right? The older we get, the faster it goes.
Did I have as much gray hair then or not?
Not quite as much, but you were working on it pretty hard then. Yeah, so that's that's my story. But I've always felt pretty grounded as an Iowan, and when I go around now, when I go back and do reunions with my college friends, they still see that same thing, and I think that's pretty much where my sense of service came from watching my dad. We lived in a small town. He was literally Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
We had one stoplight, and so during the school day, he would actually roll out a stop sign at Main and 6th Street that he would take down at the end of the day, because that was the only stop sign we needed in our town to protect kids. But yeah, it was an interesting way to grow up. And my father, I'll share a little bit more about him. He started the Little League and the T-ball and all these things. And so I watched my dad serve the community selflessly, not for money. And I saw all the love, even though he was the chief of police in a small town. Everyone loved him because they knew he was a certain thing.
If you're having stress in your life, or if you're having anxiety, or if you're upset, how can you be upset or have any of that if you're giving, if you're coaching a Little League team, if you're doing things for the community? You can't.
No.
It's not possible, I don't think, mentally, if you're serving people. So I like that idea. How did your Iowa roots help you when you're in Florida and you're in college or you're playing golf? Tell us more about a little bit about coming from Iowa, being a kid from Iowa.
Well, I think again it's just about humility, and I never experienced any sort of uncertainty about being from here. Again, my dad was a pretty dynamic person, and I also had my mother was one of the most loving people you'd ever meet in your life. So my folks ended up divorcing when I was late in high school, but they provided a wonderful, solid home for us to grow up in. But I always had a lot of confidence that we were doing the right things, I suppose. And so going out into the world and just sort of taking that humble foundation, I was always surprised about the level of success even that I achieved. I've been doing what I do professionally for 25 years. I just started this Valor Wealth Planning is a new boutique firm in Iowa City that I founded in the fall of last year after working with a large contingent of other people for years and years. And I got to a point in my life where I wanted to redefine, restructure what I'm doing and where my meaning is derived, and so I really enjoy the mathematical problems, and that's a gift that I have is the math side, if you will, of helping people with investments. But that's not the reason I'm here. My working as a financial advisor, as an investment manager, is my platform to do good.
Right.
And
how did you get into it?
Yeah.
Just real brief. How did you? How did the stock market or wealth planning? What intrigued you? How did you get excited about that?
I love math. I mean,
Okay.
I love problem solving, and so I'd quickly try to get to the end of the puzzle. And so when I started, in 1997, I was watching CNBC every morning before I was a national sales director for a publicly traded hotel company at 27 in Dallas. And I'll go back a little further. I started delivering papers when I was 9. When I was 14, I got a 30-hour-a-week job at the Dairy Queen in Tipton. I worked at a grocery store. I worked as a bellhop all the way through college.
What'd you do with the money?
I saved it.
There you go. Did you put it in the stock market then?
Oh yeah, I started buying mutual funds when I was 19 because of my stepfather.
Ah,
That's
interesting.
Yeah, my stepfather is a master investor, in fact, and he's built really extraordinary wealth for himself and generationally for our family. And he ran a company with 700 people in it, but most of the wealth that he's made in his life has been from market investing. And I learned a lot from him about that discipline.
Great.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to some of the young listeners, it doesn't hurt to have $100 a week or $500 a month and just let it ride and just roll and just watch what happens over 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
That's what people don't realize on a stock market. It's not a quick buck. We're not talking about shorting stuff or buying future
Options.
Just for, that's another topic we don't need to get into. But I mean, just let it ride. Just invest in good companies, and you're investing in America.
The greatest power in the world is compounding interest, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's going to be ups and downs.
Yeah.
and I don't know if this is good advice or not, and I'm not a stockbroker. Don't look at it. Just let it ride. Just let it go.
Yeah, I think that's correct, Gary. And I think that the other thing is I've had the opportunity, this goes back to Iowa roots, I've had the opportunity to serve so many people that had very modest beginnings, if you will, and many of them had modest ends and yet saved a lot of money and had very successful retirements. Because the truth is, being wealthy, being rich, means nothing more than being able to satisfy your wants and desires. That's one of the problems I think we face in America today is we have a identity crisis related to what wealth or abundance means. Because abundance doesn't mean having the nicest car, the biggest house. Abundance means having more than you want. And I have clients that have a little farm down in Washington. They both worked as custodians their entire lives at the University of Iowa. They saved hundreds of thousands of dollars through good strategy and consistent savings, and they're so happy.
Right.
And then I have people who make $1 million a year and are worth $10 million, and they're miserable.
Right.
And this gets into the point, really, that one of the things I wanted to talk about today is I do wealth management. I'm also a poet, and I'm a writer, and I've put a lot more energy into those things. At some point, I'm going to release a book of poetry, and I'm probably going to release a book about my life called One More Sunset, which is also a foundation that I'm in the early stages of starting, and it's to help address people who are in dire struggle with suicidal depression and anxiety.
Tell us more about that. Tell us how you kind of are going down this path. I think that's a great thing. I like your comments on the money part of it. It depends on, you have to be internally happy with yourself. I think it starts with yourself, doesn't it? And money doesn't buy you happiness, obviously. I mean, it's a different approach. It doesn't hurt you, but then you can't take it with you. You hear that all the time. But, so you have a thing called life. What are you doing with it? And I think that's what you're talking about, right?
100%.
Right.
I've again, as a philosopher and I think a student of life, I observe people. I try to find happiness, and I'm fortunate. I talk about currencies, and money, of course, is one, but it's only one. And I formulated this view in the last couple of years. I believe that the purpose of our life is to discover our currency, or plural currencies. Many people have more than one, and those may include money or intellect or musical ability or artistic ability or kindness or intuition, compassion. Those are our currencies. That's the menu we can select from, and God gives all of us one or more of the above. We don't know, but I think the purpose of life is to discover what yours is. But all of the meaning in life comes from giving it away to as many other people as you can. Because as you said, I know one thing for certain. When I die, if I'm still capable and have my faculties when that time comes, I'm not going to be sitting on my deathbed looking at the people that I love saying, I wish I made more money in 2023.
Right.
That won't happen.
Right.
But what if I could have helped one more person?
Right.
And so I have suffered from profound depression, PTSD, panic disorder, all the above.
Tell me, let's start with depression.
Yeah.
Because I'm glad that you're here and you're talking about this, because I think we all suffer probably from a little bit of depression once in a while.
Yeah.
There's some people that have more severe acute depression, anxiety issues that is mental illness. It isn't, and I don't know whether it's because it's society, how driven we are to make money, to be successful, to succeed. Anyway, I'll let you roll with this, but it is something that we all know people with it. We all probably have instances of it. And how do you deal with it? And let's start with depression.
Yeah.
What is it?
Well,
tell me more.
It's a feeling that manifests in many different ways for different people. I can really only speak to how I feel, but I've felt this way since I was 17 or 18. I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was 17 or 18 years old, and one of the other things is it's getting a little bit better, but
Who diagnosed it?
a physician
A
in
medical
Orlando.
doctor.
Oh yeah,
A medical doctor.
a medical doctor who referred me to a psychiatrist and psychologist, and that's another thing that's interesting.
Yeah.
I've done therapy on and off since I was 19, 17, 18, 19 years old, and hundreds of sessions, and I found good therapists and bad ones, and I've made breakthroughs, and I encourage people, if they have access to those resources, to use them. I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm not trained as a psychologist, so the things that I say are mostly derivative of my life experience.
Let's take therapy. You
Yeah.
talked about therapists.
Yeah.
My own personal opinion is we all need therapists.
Yeah.
You have to be brave to seek out a therapist. Not that you think there's something wrong with you or whatnot, or whatever mentally you think you're at, but where do you go when you have maybe some things that you want to talk about? Maybe it's not, you really can't discuss with family, or maybe it's somebody else,
Yeah.
a coach,
Yeah.
a mentor, a therapist. To me, a trained, really skilled therapist is good for your soul. It's good for your mental health.
Yeah.
Right.
I think so, I sorry, I hesitate for a moment. There are a lot of, it's like every other profession. There's a lot of mediocrity, and I don't mean that to sound mean. I think the first thing that has to happen is you have to have an openness to accept where you are, and then find somebody to meet you there. And so, the goal of my work and my life really is to illuminate where people are. Even before we start talking about how to get folks to therapy, I want to talk about how to acknowledge someone else, how to recognize where they are, how to recognize it in yourself. So the reason that my foundation is going to be called One More Sunset is because I specifically want to work with people who are in danger of suicide, or who feel like they want to end their life early.
And it's more people than we probably think, isn't it?
As you said, most everybody has had at least one moment in their life when
Right.
they wanted to commit suicide.
Right.
It's when that becomes pervasive. An interesting thing, Gary, is that, and I just wanted to say, I thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about my experience, because I know that there will be people who hear what I'm saying and it'll resonate and it might help them. But in the professional setting, so we're all afraid. Everyone's afraid of something, and so most folks, if they had someone who has bad depression, they may not like how it manifests, because that person, comes into the office at 9:30 instead of 8:30, and they get tired of it because, well, I'm here every day at 8:30, and they don't understand that person was up till midnight last night working, trying to think about how to be better at their job, and also just even to stay alive. And when someone that you work with comes to you and says, I struggle with depression, that takes incredible courage to say one time even, I really am struggling with my depression. And so what I would hope, if I have any legacy at all, is that part of it is allowing others to say, you know what, my life doesn't have to look like that person's, and I'm thankful that I don't experience the things that make it so hard for Mike to even get out of the house some days.
So what is depression?
Yeah, it's a paralyzing state of being where you lack hope.
Do you lack confidence?
I don't think I do.
Right.
To be honest with you, I think I'm a pretty good person. I think I recognize my talents. I've found my currencies. But sometimes I just get absolutely paralyzed by it. And
How so?
It's
Are you
like
overwhelmed with work?
Yeah.
Success at work? What
Yeah.
preempts that mindset? I'm just trying to dig in.
Well,
here.
there's two aspects. There's situational depression and biochemical depression, and when those two intersect, look out. Like folks like me, I take medicines as well. I have for 30 years, and they help, because I have biochemical imbalances, and so that that doesn't resolve. It doesn't entirely resolve if I run more or exercise more or do anything different. It's the way that I live, right? And I have 8 children. I have 5 of my own and 3. I've raised 8 children, and 2 of my kids have had issues from time to time with depression as well. And on one instance, this is another thing that's fascinating. We all think in this world, particularly social media driven world, that everyone else has a better life than we have. You know, that their life's perfect, that they don't suffer like we suffer. And we all want that life. But I remember telling one of my children, I'm like, what if this is your way of being? Why are we telling people that you can't have depression and have a joyful life also? Because I have moments of pure joy every day, and I have moments of sorrow almost every day. And the depth of the sorrow that I experience really hurts, but it doesn't disqualify tomorrow. You know, my son, I'd asked him before I came on here because I wanted to talk personally about why this is so important. When I was 19 or 20 years old was the first time that I put a gun into my mouth. At 19 or 20 years old, my parents had a small caliber pistol in their bedside table, and I sat for minutes and minutes by myself. I was the only person in the house. I easily could have died that night. I spent 2 years, 13 to 15 years ago, knowing that I wanted to die virtually every day, you know, and can I understand? And I can't explain it to you, but it's like if Austin and I speak Chinese and no one else speaks Chinese,
right?
That's what it's like to have that brand of depression. That when you get to where you have to deal with suicidal depression, it's never going away.
You lost all hope. You didn't think you had any worth.
No worth, no. And I just didn't want, and it hurt so much to be alive that I didn't want to do it anymore. And so, and now I will tell you something. I reached a breakthrough, and I've made a pact with myself. I know for certain I'll never die at my own hand, which is why I want to do this work. It's why I want to author this work. I want to write a book. I want to talk to kids about it. I have dozens of kids. I mean, when I say kids, 16 to 35 that will call me in the middle of the night.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
And I've had some of them I've met one time randomly, and we've had this conversation. And it starts here. My son told me 3 years ago that he had a hard time. I've been divorced twice. My first divorce was difficult. There was a lot of fallout for my children and my oldest son. My oldest son has bipolar depression. And he again, I talked to him. I said, I'm going to be on Gary Watts' show, and I think this is a really important platform potentially to be able to start working on some things that are really important. Would you mind if I shared your story? And he said no, because he knows not to be embarrassed. Sure. But 3 years ago, because we can't help it, you know, when you have that sort of thing going on in your mind and your being, it's not your fault. You know, they say that people don't pretend to be depressed; they pretend to be okay.
You can't help it, but you need help.
You need help, and I said to Henry, he said to me, Dad, there's just a lot of times when I just don't feel like going on anymore. And I said, let me tell you something, son. Do this. I said, if you get to the point where you're going to take your own life, and again, as a person who's been right there, I said, when you get to the point where you're going to take your own life, call me one more time. Just promise me that you'll call me one more time. And that sounds like a cliched thing to say, because always when someone's ready to die, we want to prevent their immediate death, right? And like, I have a friend in California who answers the hotline every night, and she's a beautiful human being, Chris Ledman. She walks the walk, and she talks people down every night. But she's triage. I'm talking about prevention. And I said to him, you call me one more time, and it's not going to be for the reason that you think. Here's what it's going to be. I said, I'm 50 at the time. I've seen things that you have got to see in this world. There is magic out there every day.
Every day.
What if tomorrow you meet the love of your life? What if you meet somebody that makes you feel different than you ever have felt, ever? What if you see, well, I said, we'll get on an airplane. We'll go to the Grand Canyon. We'll go to the top of the Empire State Building. We'll go to England and watch the Rolling Stones. I'm not kidding.
I have seen them. They're great.
Yeah, a bunch of times, right? And some of that sounds like a person of privilege, and I have at times had the privilege of excess money, and I've used it to help many people, and I've used it to experience things. But I said we can also go to that little pond we like, and we can get a picnic, and we can sit there till sunset, and we can catch a few fish. And I said to him, and this is sad to me, and I said, if we get done with doing that, and you still want to kill yourself, you can, which is an awful thing to say to your child, but that is the reality that people don't understand about depression. People think that that suicide is selfish. It's not. It's an inevitability if you can't get out of that space. It's an inevitability. And so it's about restoring hope. I said, but I'll blow your mind, man. Every time you get in that space, call me once.
Yeah.
Let me show you something that you haven't seen. What if tomorrow night is the best sunset you've ever seen? And you just check out today.
And that's why you have your foundation, right?
I'm starting this foundation.
What's it called?
One More Sunset.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So people have depression. It's a mental state, and then talk about, you mentioned some other words, anxiety.
Yeah, anxiety.
PTSD or something.
The anxiety. So in my case, the way that it manifested, I don't have bipolar, but I have symptoms from time to time that mimic that, in that I'll have very low lows, I'll have sort of manic feeling highs, but also the panic attacks. When I start to feel overwhelmed, it'll manifest physiologically.
What creates your overwhelm? What gets you overwhelmed?
Well, that's
give me an example.
I don't know. I really don't.
You could be driving down the road, somebody cuts you off, or
I could be sitting in my house by myself. You and I could be having a beer, not even a coffee. We could just be sitting outside at 30 Hop enjoying a beautiful afternoon, and all of a sudden my heart rate's 140 beats a minute.
Oh, wow.
That's what happens to people that have anxiety. Huh. I have been to the hospital 8 to 10 times, certain I was dying of a heart attack, and I wasn't. I had panic attacks, but it mimics that. My heart rate will be 180 beats a minute, and I think I'm dying. And that's another thing for folks who suffer from panic attacks. They beat you down because they're so scary and they're so crippling, and you get to the point where whatever you're doing in your life, you're like, oh my God, I get on an airplane. Okay, that was a thing. I would be flying.
You were anxious to get on a plane.
Well, I'd think that something medically would happen to me while I was in the air, and they couldn't save me. But it starts.
It's out of your control,
mm-hmm.
and that kind of makes you anxious. Something that you can't control.
Yeah.
Well, I think as creatures, we all want to control everything.
Yes.
Kind of. I mean, we all kind of do.
we do.
And then when you're it's kind of like flying. I guess the way I used to think, I kind of get a little nervous on a flight too, and I thought, well, I'm in the hands of the air traffic controllers, and hopefully the pilots know what they're doing. There's not much I can say or do about it.
One of two things is going to happen: we're going to land or we're going to crash.
So anyway,
it was funny though. I actually am a person of faith, and I respect all people's pursuit of truth.
Yeah.
And a higher power.
Right.
But I
tell us about your faith.
Yeah.
And how does that interact with anxiety, depression, and some mental states?
Yeah, and my purpose. To be honest with you, I'll say two things. One is I was raised a Methodist. I spent time in the Catholic Church. I studied philosophy and religion, and so I have a relatively broad and somewhat specific basis for my sort of looking at the world from a religious perspective. I'm absolutely certain of the existence of something bigger than me, and this meeting today was reassurance of that. If we have our eyes open, we see every day we see reminders that there's something at work bigger than just this plane that we live on. I believe that. I pray every day. I have a daily conversation. There's people that do it differently than I do, and I respect that for sure. But it's helped keep me alive. And I'll tell you another anecdotal story about. I was on a podcast for a friend of mine who's a comedian, and he knows my life philosophy, and he's an agnostic at this point. He just hasn't taken the time to figure out where he's at. But he calls it the Christian treasure hunt, because what I told him is he knows that I'm a Christian, and he knows that I'm trying to do. I ask every morning to be a vessel for goodwill, even on my weakest days, on my worst days. And what I find is that the more I can be a vessel for goodwill, the less I think about my anxiety, my depression, right? Cool. So one morning I'm standing in the shower. It might be 5 or 6 years ago, and I was having a really bad day. It was hard just to get to that point so I could get myself out of the house. And I hear a voice. I swear to you. And it's become my mantra. It said, starting today, you'll be the best thing that happens to at least one person every day for the rest of your life.
Fantastic.
And so what started to happen to me was that those were marching orders for me.
And you heard a voice.
Yes.
Were you praying at the time?
Nope.
Or?
I was just standing in the shower feeling pretty miserable. And
say it again. What was said?
Starting today, you will be the best thing that happens to at least one other person every day for the rest of your life.
Wow. And have you?
I've tried, and that's why Nathan laughs at me and says it's the Christian treasure hunt, because he made a joke, and I've already thought of it, but I'd already thought of it. This is a couple of years ago around Christmas. He said, well, what happens if you get to the end of the day and you weren't someone's best thing? I said, well, then I call Uber Eats and I tip the driver an extra $5. Yeah. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'll buy someone a cup of coffee, or I'll tell them I love their hat, or you have pretty eyes, or, and in the world we live in today, compliments aren't always appreciated in all candor, and people aren't always, we've put so many barriers and boundaries in place, but the reality is we're starving for attention and affection and touch and love. Think about how little of your life you spend in physical touch with another human being. Mm-hmm. And think about how sad that is. We are meant to be communal creatures, and yet we are so lonely, right?
Everybody is.
Everyone.
In a way.
Yes. So that's another thing. I walk out into the world. I'm so imperfect too, by the way. I'm so flawed. Yeah, and but I walk out into the world and I start looking, because this distracts me. It's a treasure hunt. I look at people's faces and I try to determine, wow, could that person use some encouraging today? Or, I'll tell you another quick story. One of the most profound things that ever happened in my life, I was 26, 25 years old maybe, and I'd moved to Dallas for a job. And I was there by myself. My wife and kids hadn't come down. And my dad came out from Virginia to help me buy some stuff for my new house, like parents do. And then we were at Target, and it was my birthday. It was August 25th, our birthday. And the next day was the first day of school in Dallas. And there was this Mexican woman with 2 little kids, a baby and a 5 or 6 year old. And she had a shopping cart full of school supplies. And my dad and I had 7 or 8 items. We stood behind her and we watched her take out 3 or 4 different credit cards, and they declined them all. And it was her little boy's very first day of school of his whole life. And they had to put the stuff aside and leave. And I'm just being honest, I didn't have a lot of extra money, but that's etched in my mind because I was heartbroken about everything about that was that little boy's first day of school, and how his mother must have felt, right. How he's smiling and laughing and not even knowing that he's going to be the kid who shows up to school with no stuff. And so that and it goes back to the voice that I heard. Since that time, there's been a dozen times where I've just paid for it, right. And 100 maybe. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back because it's not about me. It's about being a vessel for better.
What did it mean to those people?
When I've done these, my God.
What's it mean to them? They could be having a bad day.
Sam.
They could be depressed. They could be going through a divorce. Who knows what those people are doing? And we never spend the time to get to know them.
No. It changes your life, though.
Yeah, it does. Because how did you feel in that moment? You couldn't have felt any better, and you didn't do it for recognition.
No.
It isn't you personally, but to that family, that could have got them over the hump. Or that waitress, you give her an extra $20 or something.
Yes. My son Sam, Gary, my son Sam and I were outside of Wendy's 4 years ago, probably, right here in Coralville.
Yeah.
And I see a woman and her who turned out to be her mom and two little kids pull up in a minivan, and the husband is in a U-Haul, and they're traveling across country, and they get in a terrible fight in the parking lot, and I'm afraid this man's going to hit this woman. I mean, they're really going at it.
Yeah.
And I walk up to the car. The guy drives off, and I walk over to the car, and this woman is probably in her 60s, and the daughter's in her 30s, and there's two little girls in the back of the van, and they're all crying. And I'm like, and I usually keep some cash in my wallet just in case, and I had a couple $100. And I said, "What's going on?" And they're like, "It's okay, sir. We're okay." And I'm like, "You're not okay." And she said, "I just had a bad fight with my husband. We're driving to South Dakota, and we need a place to stay, and the kids are hungry, and And I said, "Well, how you doing on money?" And she said, "Not very good." And I said, "Okay." And I took out $200 and I handed it to the mother, and they just burst into tears. Because the relief, I said, just get a little, there's a hotel right here, rest for the night, feed the girls, let them have some fun, and start tomorrow. And that's the whole point, right?
I like that gets back to the foundation.
Yes.
Get it going. And then there's so many people that just need that $100 or $200 or they just need, you know what it all gets back to, this is kind of a strange word, but we don't do it enough, is love.
Yeah.
They, at that moment in time, that lady or kid, they need somebody to love them.
Yes.
Everybody does.
Yes.
And we don't get enough of it.
No.
We're afraid of it.
We need hope and love.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is, I'm careful in recounting these stories. I don't share them with a lot of people because I don't want any credit because it doesn't have anything to do with me.
Right.
And that when I was talking about currencies earlier, money is, I'm sorry, it does have a lot of utility. There are so many things we can do if we have more as opposed to having less.
Right.
Not if we hoard it.
No, give it away.
Yes.
You got to give it away.
Yeah.
You've been extremely successful. You've made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now it's your time. Give it away.
Yeah. And I've had lean times, but I always give, and I give because I'm certain that that's what I'm called to do. I'm called to recognize people in their moments of need, and that's the thing. Pete Townsend wrote a song for a movie called Iron Man called "A Friend is a Friend," and if you ever have a chance to listen to it, and it talks about the true nature of friendship and basically how a real bond of friendship cannot be broken, and it's a contract that you can borrow from me and I can borrow from you, and we don't keep score. I've said for years, friends don't keep score.
You know what's interesting about friends? How many true friends do you have? And usually you can do it on one hand or less.
We did it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, and you think about that, I got all kinds of friends. Come on. A true friend is somebody you can call in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
A true friend's going to come to the hospital no matter what's going on. A true friend's going to help you no matter what. They're not going to ask questions.
No.
And that's a rare bird. That's a rare bird for most people. And another goal might be, let's go work toward more friends.
Yeah.
Here's something I just, we're not going to solve this today, but
no.
Think of and we're talking mental illness a lot here. Think of the folks that are on the streets that live outside at night, homeless, in shelters. And when you look at that, and it seems like, I'll get on a little bit of a soapbox, it seems like, state appropriations, local appropriations, it's difficult to have money for everything. But it seems like mental health is such a huge issue for every community, and it seems like we need more funding. Of course, that's how to get funding, and I think everybody admit it's an issue. But the shelter house here in Iowa City, it's a fabulous place. They run a great tight ship. You can't get in there unless you're clean. I mean, in other words, you can't do drugs and whatnot. But if you're ever over there, it's a beautiful facility. It's where folks know they can at least get a shower and a clean room, and they're going to take care of them. And when I go to larger cities and I see the homeless and whatnot, there's drug use, there's all kinds of stuff going on out there. But what a sad situation, and I don't know how we tackle it. But there's a lot of people that need, and a lot of them are veterans, which really affects me. It makes me sad to know they fight for our country, then they're on our streets, and they need help. And it's just, how do you reach out to those folks?
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's a systemic problem, and there's so many facets to it that make it difficult, inclusive of our predispositions about mental illness, depression, anxiety, and the paralysis that results from it. I think, again, it comes back to purpose. Like, what's the purpose of your life? We have to allow, it's grace, Gary. Like, we've got to allow everybody and encourage them to find their purpose. And so this is what I guess I'm saying in a nutshell. There might be somebody, imagine, this is the truth. Some of these homeless people that we see that end up in these shelters are unbelievable musicians and artists and mathematically genius, right? But we don't extract any of their currencies because we've written them off.
Right.
And you know what? Maybe the best they can do is paint 10 hours a week, but what if they create a masterpiece, right? And everybody's life has the ability to create something profound. And so what I'm saying is, the word you used it, but it's love. It's all, this is not kumbaya and all, like, let's just walk out feeling like we fixed everything, because we didn't. But if everybody just works a little bit more towards seeing other people where they are and encouraging the very best that could come out of them, it doesn't make you less for someone else to achieve the best that they could be. And that's my hope. I want to take every opportunity that I have in my life to encourage people. Lastly, I don't know if this is, I want to say, as a business person, from a small town in Iowa, I have had years where I earned more money than I ever could have imagined was possible, right? 10 times what my dad ever earned. That has nothing to do with who I am as a human being. Right. I want to be able to say to folks, you can have depression, you can have paralytic depression, you can have instances of feeling suicidal. I've lost several friends to suicide, and I'm heartbroken about it. But you can have all those things and be successful as a business person, as a writer, as a social worker, as a teacher. You're not prohibited because it's hard to get out of bed. And then we need to start helping each other.
Let me ask you this. Let's talk about the physical part, not the mental.
Yeah.
So let's say that it's hard to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do whatever. And let's say you want to lose weight, or you want to run a 5K.
Yeah.
Whatever. You kind of know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
And you suffer from some anxiety and depression. And everybody's going, hey, you got to go for a run or go for a walk, or you got to eat better. We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So you do suffer from those mental states. So does the physical part, if you do get out of bed earlier somehow, and you force yourself to get in a habit and a routine, or maybe riding your bike, whatever you're doing, does that help you? Can that help you? Can that help your mental state?
Yes.
Going for a walk, just a walk, and I'm reading some things about a gratitude walk. Every day, maybe it's just a walk, but go out for 5 minutes and just think about what you're grateful for. Try it. Just what you're grateful for. And in that state of mind, you're not going to be upset. You're going to be in a great state because you're talking about all the nice things, your family, your kid, whatever you're grateful for. But think about that. So anyway, back to the physical part.
Yeah.
Tell me how that enters in.
It's a huge part of it. Like, I actually very much enjoy exercise, and I will go through periods of time where I exercise 4 or 5 days a week for several months, and then I'll have sort of episodic or a session where everything changes. And again, it's like the hardest part is, we all know, those of us who experience the types of depression and issues that I have, we know that it would be better if we went for a run. We know it would be better if we went to the gym every day. My fiance, Carrie, she tells me all the time, she's like, honey, I just want you to go to the gym so you'll feel better, you know? Yeah. And, but I guess one of the things I'm trying to explain is, and it's hard for it not to sound like an excuse. There are a lot of times when you're trying to protect, you're creating boundaries, and you're just trying to get as much done as you can that day. Like, I've got the demands of my workplace, and I have to respond to my children, and I talk to my mom every day in Florida. And so then some of it also is about, so when you start to pick which boundaries, how do I protect myself? She might want to go across to the gym for an hour, which is what I ought to be doing. And I know physiologically it was better for me, for my blood pressure. It's better for me. That's a really great question. And yes, of course, it'd be better if you do it. But that's the thing, too, is what ends up happening is then there's this air of judgment when you see folks who don't. I'm not saying.
Does it intimidate you that if you're not going, I'm not going to be like this person, so I'm not going to go?
Sometimes.
Is there intimidation?
Yeah.
Don't you think part of the mindset of the depression and anxiety is you're lonely, you're alone?
Yeah.
Don't you think sometimes at the gym, you're around your buddies, or you're in a class, or you're in a spin class, or you're in a aerobics or Pilates, well, you're around your friends, and a lot of times just going to those, you go, I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. But that spin class, you get some energy, you get some excitement because you're there with your friends. It isn't just that you're doing something good for yourself, because you are.
Yeah.
But it's like it's around your buddies. And I think if we're isolated, you can't share the love, you can't feel love from other people. And doesn't that add to it?
It's brilliant. No, it's exactly right. You're exactly right. And also, I talk about this a lot too, because obviously I'm an extrovert. Like, I love to talk to talk to everybody. But what I sometimes forget then too, and this is where the balance comes in. I have one speed, and it's 180 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like, if I get to meet you, when I invest in somebody, I'm all in. Yeah. You know, I mean, literally, I can meet someone this week, and they can call me Tuesday, and I'll be in Ankeny, and they'll say, "Listen, I'm in a crisis," and I'll drive back and I'll help them. Right. I have one speed. But because I have one speed, there are times when I have to. It wears you out.
You need a break.
Yes, you need a break. I used to think that my favorite thing to do is to talk to other people and encourage and get into these conversations, and it is. I get all jazzed, but then also, it does zap you, and then you fall back into that space, you know, where you're trying to kind of figure out what to do. I like what you're saying, and I know intuitively for me that when I exercise more, I feel better in every way. And also, what I'm thinking about as you're saying this is, I'm planning forward about what I'm going to do with this foundation, how I'm going to reach more people. Yeah. A friend of mine yesterday, she's an artist, and we're going to have lunch this week. But she said, I was talking with her about coming on your show, and you know her, and she said, you need to write a book, and you maybe need to write a book sooner than later. Yeah, so that you can establish credibility with your story, and your story will resonate with a lot of people. Yeah. But I'm saying, like, even to your point, there's a David Goggins. It's like there's two opposite poles. You got David Goggins who says, do it, and I don't care how you feel, and he's right. Right. And then you've got this side over here saying, you know, be really careful with your spirit and protect yourself so that you can have enough energy to do this. And somewhere in the middle of those two things is where I need to be.
Yeah, as long as you recognize that. I got a story I tell everybody about you. Talk about giving. When Emily, my daughter, was a golfer, she was a great golfer, and she went to state.
She was.
We were, I don't remember how we did the clubs, but I remember
the pings.
And I think you drove, and you knew you had, I was leaving for the state tournament with Emily.
Yeah.
And I think we met out in my driveway, and you drove to Des Moines or back. I don't know what you did.
Quad Cities. My buddy Johnny got them. Mm-hmm.
And you went and got the clubs, and I think I'm about on my way out, and here you come with her new clubs.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah, that was one of the coolest things. I mean, who'd have done that? And it was actually, I think, either the morning of or the night before.
Yes.
We're headed to, I think, Granger to play at that course.
Yeah.
And here you come with those clubs. That meant the world to me and to her.
Yeah.
And I think she played great. Now I don't know if it was the clubs. I think she had a pretty good swing.
She also had an Odyssey 2-ball center shafted putter.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. No, that. So, yeah. Well, thank you for remembering that.
I remember. Yeah. So once in a while, I remember things. So let's go. Let's finish today. I think you got some. This has been great. First of all,
thank you.
And let's get maybe a picture. Austin, I don't know if you can throw up. Let's talk. Let's talk more about. We're not going to solve the world's problems today, but I think it's been great to kind of touch this because it affects everybody.
Yeah.
Anybody that says they don't know anybody with depression or had these thoughts, you're kidding yourselves.
Yeah.
I like the idea that, faith is part of your journey. Yeah. That's fantastic because we all need something. We all need a faith in God or whatever you believe in, some type of supreme being because we can't figure this all out ourselves. So anyway, I'm glad you mentioned that. And tell us, here's a shot. Yeah. And it's a sunset. So tell us what you're trying to do and talk just briefly about your foundation.
Okay, I will. And also this is one of my favorite images, but I'll tell you, I love sunsets. All my children know that I love them. I stop and take pictures. That's right near where I lived over
Hickory Hill?
Yeah. No, that's on the west side. That's near Dempster Drive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so and what's really curious is my little boy Holden, who again I'll mention him today too. He's 9 years old, and you talk about how God works in your life. I had a baby when I was 44 years old, and this little boy has transformed my life. But he will now at 9 years old be out for walks and snap shots of sunsets and send them to me. Yes,
good for him.
and so I think it'll sound silly, but God's saying good night to us, and you look at the way He paints the skies, and there's something magical about that. And so the foundation, the purpose of the foundation, and I don't have it all figured out. It's really in its infancy. I need to structure it legally. It's going to be called One More Sunset. The goal of which is to help identify and assist people who are suffering with suicidal depression. And it's a longer-term effect. I'd like there to be elements of advocacy, not necessarily so much of immediate help, but helping to access resources. And then what I'd really like to do is work as a speaker where I could go and talk particularly to high school. I think that age of 15 to 25 is very critical, and there's so much pressure on kids. And the idea that tomorrow night, the sunset might be the best one that you've ever seen. There's so many ways in life that plays out, and it's parallel in so many ways. And so that's what I'm about to do with the foundation. And, perhaps what I was going to say is maybe in a few months when everything's up and running, I could come back and visit because I would really like to garner some more support. And I've never done anything like this. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it.
Well, you're being called to do it.
Absolutely.
And look how many lives you touch. It's great.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of things. Love, we've covered faith, mental illness, friendship, caring about people, just a lot of real, maybe working out a little more. I don't know. Got to throw that in once in a while. But what a great message. I just want to thank you. Appreciate your time, your honesty, just opening up to us. I think it's been great. And, hopefully people that listen, it'll help them if they need help. And I'm excited about your foundation. So let me know how I can help.
I will. And last, I would say that, my name is Mike Young, and my company is called Valor Wealth Planning. But if there's somebody out there who would like to talk or needs help, I'm pretty easy to find.
Good.
I'm on social media, and I would be happy to speak to anybody that would ever want to talk to me. I'd also like to tell you something, though, Gary. I've always admired a lot of things about you. Like, we're not the same, but and I think there are people in the world who think you have a bit of a hard edge. But you are one of consistently you are a kind, good person, and you do a lot of good in the world. And I was actually really surprised, and I think it's brave of you to be willing to talk to someone like me, because not everybody's comfortable, and because of the discomfort, they again will disqualify you. And you were willing to allow me this audience, and I thank you for that.
That's great. My pleasure. Good to see you, Mike Young.
Have a great day.
You bet.